Arrival at Station Zeta. The flickering lights of Station Zeta illuminated the darkness of space like a beacon. A massive structure of interlocking metallic arms and domes, it floated near the edge of the Proxima Galaxy, a hub for all manner of interstellar travelers and traders. To Lieutenant Marcus Hale, it was a far cry from the sleek military bases he was used to. But he was here for a different mission, one that required him to blend in as just another face in the crowd. As Marcus stepped off the transport shuttle, he was immediately struck by the chaotic energy of the station. Crowds of aliens from dozens of species moved in all directions, each immersed in their own conversations, bartering, or navigating the station's labyrinthine halls. Holographic advertisements danced along the walls, showing everything from luxury ships to exotic foods, while drones buzzed above, delivering packages and supplies. For Marcus, whose life had been spent mostly on military ships, it was both overwhelming and intriguing. He took a deep breath and adjusted the collar of his civilian jacket, a far cry from his usual tactical uniform. This undercover role was a challenge, but Marcus had always thrived in new situations. He'd been assigned here under the pretense of being a security technician, but his true mission was to observe potential threats to Earth's interests and gather intel on alien activities. His communicator buzzed with a new message from his handler back on Earth. "Remember, you're just a normal technician. No heroics, Marcus. Blend in and observe." Marcus smirked. Blending in wasn't exactly his strong suit, but he would give it his best shot. As he wandered through the main thoroughfare, his attention was suddenly drawn to a strange, rhythmic hum. It wasn't loud, just a subtle vibration that he could feel through the floor. Following the sound, he found himself near one of the station's residential wings. The hum grew stronger, almost like it was calling to him, leading him down a dimly lit hallway. He hadn't realized he was lost in thought until a voice snapped him out of his trance. "New here, aren't you?" Marcus turned to see a young woman, well, not exactly a woman, but close enough in appearance to make him think so. She had skin of a soft, iridescent lavender hue, and her eyes glowed faintly, like two stars peeking out from the edge of a nebula. Her hair was a vibrant green, cascading over her shoulders in a way that seemed to defy gravity. Despite her alien appearance, there was something deeply familiar about her gaze, something that reminded him of Earth. "Yes, first day on the job," Marcus replied, trying to keep his tone casual. "Security technician, here to make sure everything's running smoothly." He extended his hand. "Marcus." She tilted her head slightly, examining his hand as if unfamiliar with the gesture, but then offered him a smile and took his hand in hers. "My name is Thalia, and it's not often we get humans here at Station Zeta. Most are hesitant to come so far from home." Her touch was warm, almost electric, sending a jolt up his arm. He quickly released her hand, not wanting to appear too eager. "Just a job," Marcus said with a shrug, though he sensed she saw through his nonchalance. "I like a good challenge, and besides, there's a lot to learn out here." Thalia laughed softly, a sound that seemed to ripple through the air. "You'll find no shortage of challenges here, Marcus, especially in this section." She glanced over her shoulder down the hall, her expression growing serious. "Things have been unstable lately. Some of us are having trouble adjusting to the station's environmental controls." Marcus raised an eyebrow, noting the faint concern in her voice. Something wrong with the systems? Her gaze lingered on him, as if deciding whether to share more. "Let's just say, there are some cycles and shifts that are difficult for my kind. I'm sure you'll understand soon enough." She hesitated, her eyes narrowing as if she could sense more about him than he wanted to reveal. "Right," he replied, playing along. "I'll keep an eye out for any anomalies. Feel free to report any issues to me, especially if they're affecting the residents." He smiled, trying to convey the image of a helpful technician, though his instincts were already on high alert. They shared a brief, charged silence before she nodded. "Thank you, Marcus. I might just take you up on that." With one last glance, she disappeared into a nearby doorway, leaving him alone in the hallway. As he continued his walk to his assigned quarters, Marcus felt the faint humming in the walls once more, the same pulse he'd sensed earlier. It was almost as if the station itself had a heartbeat, one that resonated in rhythm with his own. He found his quarters soon enough, a small, utilitarian space with just enough room for a bed, a desk, and a narrow window overlooking the dark expanse of space. Dropping his bag onto the bed, he activated the comms link on his wrist. Reporting in. Made initial contact with a resident, nothing unusual to report. Yet, he murmured, thinking of Thalia's enigmatic expression. Beginning observation phase. As he finished his report, a soft knock came at his door. Frowning, he checked the display. Residents rarely dropped by unannounced, especially not within the first hour of arrival. He opened the door to find Thalia standing there, a small device in her hand. "I thought you might need this," she said, offering him a small tool used for tuning the station's environmental controls. "Some of our systems can be temperamental." Marcus accepted the device with a polite nod. "Thank you. I appreciate the help." He gestured toward her, curious. "Is there a reason you're concerned about the environmental systems?" Thalia hesitated, then sighed. "We're in a sensitive phase of our cycle. My people, we experience heightened senses and emotions around this time. It's a natural cycle, but the artificial environment here can sometimes make it more intense." "Interesting," he said, mentally filing away the information. "I'll make sure to keep everything stable on my end. Wouldn't want any unnecessary stress on the residents." A faint smile tugged at her lips, but her eyes held a wary caution. "I'm sure you'll be a calming presence, Marcus. Just be careful. You might find some residents more attuned to you than you'd expect." Before he could respond, she turned and walked back down the hall, leaving him alone once again with a slight sense of foreboding. He glanced down at the device she'd given him, wondering if this simple tuning tool would really help, or if it was something more. His instincts told him there was more to Thalia's words than she was letting on, and that his stay at Station Zeta was going to be far more complicated than he'd anticipated. Marcus spent the rest of the evening adjusting the settings in his quarters, though his thoughts kept drifting to Thalia's warning. As he lay down to rest, the humming from the walls returned, more insistent now, matching the pulse of his own heartbeat. A strange connection. The hum had become a constant companion, a subtle vibration that followed Marcus wherever he went on Station Zeta. It was faint during the day, barely noticeable above the noise of the bustling corridors and crowded mess halls, but at night it seemed to grow stronger, pulsing like the heartbeat of the station itself. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was something alive within the metal walls. He'd heard of alien technology that could adapt to its users, but this felt different, like the station was somehow aware of him, responding to his presence. He'd mentioned it to his handler, but they dismissed it as a standard environmental fluctuation. He wasn't so sure. On the third night, as he was finishing his daily system diagnostics, a soft knock at his door jolted him from his thoughts. Opening it, he found Thalia standing there, her lavender skin shimmering faintly in the dim light of the corridor. She held a small container with a translucent lid, revealing an assortment of strange, luminescent fruits inside. "I thought you might enjoy a taste of something different," she said, smiling softly. "They're from my homeworld, and they only bloom under certain cycles. I notice you haven't been down to the food hall much, and, well, you look like someone who could use a bit of company." Marcus accepted the container, touched by the gesture, though he couldn't shake his wariness. He'd never met an alien as interested in him as Thalia was. It felt genuine, but there was an edge to it, a strange sense of connection he couldn't explain. "Thank you, Thalia," he replied, motioning for her to come in. "I appreciate the thought. This is new for me." She stepped inside, her presence seeming to fill the small room with an almost tangible energy. As she sat down, she gestured toward the fruits. "Try one. It's called a niyali. It's sweet, but with a bit of a tang. Most humans enjoy it." Marcus picked one up, examining the delicate, glowing skin. When he took a bite, a burst of flavors flooded his senses. sweet and tangy, with a hint of something floral. The taste lingered, leaving a faint warmth that spread through his chest. That's incredible. Nothing like anything I've tasted before. Felia laughed, a soft, musical sound that seemed to resonate with the hum in the walls. Our worlds are so different, yet there's something in each that the other finds fascinating. I've been studying humans for a long time. We don't get many of you out here, so I try to make the most of every encounter. Marcus arched an eyebrow, curious. And what have you learned about us? Her gaze grew thoughtful, and she seemed to search for the right words. Humans are resilient. There's a strength in you, something that refuses to yield, no matter the odds. Many of my kind admire that. It's refreshing. He chuckled, setting the Niyali down. We're stubborn, that's for sure. Sometimes I think it's our downfall as much as our strength. Felia studied him, her eyes gleaming. There's more to it than that, though. You see things differently. Where others see boundaries, you see possibilities. She leaned in slightly, her voice softening. It's part of what makes you intriguing. The air between them grew charged, and Marcus felt an inexplicable pull toward her, a magnetic force he couldn't ignore. He was a disciplined soldier, trained to resist distraction, but around Thalia, it was as if all his defenses weakened. Her presence was like a gravitational field, drawing him in. She broke the silence first, leaning back with a playful smile. Well, don't let me keep you from your duties. I just wanted to make sure you had a proper welcome. As she stood to leave, Marcus found himself speaking before he could stop. Wait, Thalia, that hum I keep hearing. Do you know anything about it? She paused, her expression shifting to one of mild surprise, then something else, something he couldn't quite read. You can feel it. Yes, he replied. It's subtle, but it's there. Almost like a heartbeat. Thalia looked away for a moment, as if considering her response. When she looked back, her eyes held an intensity he hadn't seen before. That's not just the station. It's something my people can sense naturally, a kind of resonance with certain places or people. I didn't expect you to feel it. Marcus's mind raced, but he kept his voice calm. Why would I be able to feel it? She hesitated, then took a deep breath. There are connections between living things, bonds that go beyond what we can see or explain. Sometimes, those connections are powerful enough to transcend the boundaries of our species. She gave him a small, almost shy smile. Perhaps you and I share such a connection. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Marcus wasn't sure how to respond. He wanted to laugh it off, to brush it aside as alien superstition, but something deep within him resonated with her words. He felt it too, a sense of familiarity, an inexplicable pull. He'd never believed in fate, but Thalia's presence challenged that certainty. Before he could speak, the station's emergency lights flashed red, followed by a loud, pulsing alarm. Thalia's eyes widened, and she instinctively moved closer to him. That's the containment alarm, she murmured. Something's breached the outer hull. Marcus's military instincts kicked in, and he moved toward his terminal to check the station's systems. The display showed a breach in one of the cargo bays, but the details were unclear. He grabbed his comm device, sending a quick alert to his handler. Containment breach, Cargo Bay 7. I'm on it. Thalia reached out, grabbing his arm. Be careful, Marcus. This isn't a normal containment breach. There's something here on the station, something dangerous. I can feel it. He glanced at her, then nodded. Stay here. I'll be back as soon as I can. Leaving Thalia in his quarters, Marcus made his way through the winding halls of Station Zeta. As he neared Cargo Bay 7, the hum in the walls intensified, vibrating through his entire body. His instincts screamed that something was wrong, but he pressed on, determined to find the source of the breach. The cargo bay was dark, the emergency lighting casting eerie shadows over the rows of crates and containers. Marcus drew his weapon, moving slowly through the rows, his senses on high alert. The hum grew louder, filling his mind until he could hardly think. It was as if the station itself was warning him, urging him to leave. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, and Marcus froze. It was tall, humanoid, but its skin glowed faintly, casting a pale light over the room. Its eyes were a deep, unearthly blue, and it moved with a fluid, almost predatory grace. He'd never seen anything like it. The creature's gaze locked onto him, and Marcus felt a wave of dread wash over him. It was as if the creature could see through him, reading his every thought, his every fear. His hand tightened on his weapon, but before he could react, the creature raised one hand, and the hum in the walls intensified, reaching a deafening crescendo. Marcus's vision blurred, and he staggered back, clutching his head as the sound reverberated through his skull. He could feel the creature's presence, probing his mind, searching for something. But then, just as suddenly, the hum stopped, and the creature vanished, leaving him alone in the dark. Shaken, he stumbled out of the cargo bay, his thoughts racing. Whatever that creature was, it was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. He had a feeling this was only the beginning, and that the strange connection he shared with Thalia might be the only thing that could help him understand the danger lurking within Station Zeta. Unseen threats and unspoken truths. The encounter in the cargo bay left Marcus unsettled, his mind whirling with questions. The creature he'd seen, if it even was a creature, was unlike any species catalogued in the Alliance's databases. It wasn't just its appearance or the way it moved. It was the way it seemed to reach into his mind, tapping into thoughts and fears he hadn't even realized were there. He'd barely made it out of the cargo bay, and he was beginning to suspect that whatever this presence was, it went far beyond a simple containment breach. When Marcus returned to his quarters, he found Thalia waiting for him, her lavender skin paler than usual. Her eyes searched his face with a concern he hadn't expected. She stood up the moment he entered, stepping closer. "What did you see?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus glanced around, instinctively checking for surveillance devices. Though he didn't see anything, he lowered his voice. "It was something I can't explain. It looked humanoid, but there was something wrong about it, like it didn't belong here." He hesitated, then added, "It was as if it could see inside my mind." Thalia's eyes widened, and she took a step back. "They're here," she murmured, almost to herself. "They." Marcus's gaze sharpened. "What do you know about this?" Thalia hesitated, her eyes flicking to the walls as if they too were listening. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a reason my people don't travel beyond the Orion Nebula without protection. There are beings, unseen forces that exist in the space between worlds. They're not part of any known race, not something you'd find in any database. We call them the Void Speakers." The name sent a chill down Marcus's spine, and he felt a surge of disbelief. "You're saying there are entities that travel through the void itself? How is that possible?" Thalia gave a sad, knowing smile. "Many things are possible beyond what we understand. My people believe the Void Speakers are remnants of an ancient civilization, beings who transcended physical form to exist in pure consciousness. They drift between the stars, feeding on energy, sometimes even the thoughts and memories of other beings." Marcus processed her words, trying to reconcile them with his military training and rational mind. So why would they be here, on this station? Thalia's expression grew more troubled. Stations like Zeta are built on energy-rich ley lines in space. They act as conduits, amplifying certain frequencies. For beings like the Void Speakers, these places are like beacons. They're drawn to them, and to the people inside. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, a mixture of curiosity and dread rising in his chest. "And you can sense them, can't you?" She nodded, her gaze meeting his. "Yes, my people have a natural sensitivity to certain energies, a resonance we can feel. That hum you've been noticing, it's a warning. The station is alerting us, telling us they're here." He took a deep breath, trying to keep his mind clear. If they feed on thoughts and memories, then what can we do? How can we fight something like that? Thalia's lips pressed into a thin line. "We don't fight them, Marcus. We endure. The void speakers are dangerous, but they're also curious. They don't destroy for the sake of it. They probe, they test, but they don't kill, at least not intentionally." "Not intentionally," he echoed, his voice tinged with skepticism. "That's not exactly reassuring." She looked down, her voice barely audible. "It's the best we can hope for." Just then, a chime echoed through the room. His communicator buzzed, and Marcus pulled it up to find a priority message from his handler. "Station reports unexplained energy surges in multiple sections. Possible containment breach. All personnel advised to stay on alert." Marcus glanced back at Thalia, and she met his gaze with a steady calm that only deepened his suspicion. He'd been trained to rely on hard facts and clear threats, not vague warnings and ancient superstitions. But Thalia's words carried a weight that made him hesitate. "If these void speakers are as dangerous as you say, why are you here?" he asked, unable to keep the edge of suspicion out of his voice. She held his gaze, her eyes glimmering with a complex mix of fear and defiance. "Because I had no choice. The void speakers, they're drawn to certain people, certain energies. That's why I left my homeworld, hoping I could escape their influence. But even here, I can feel them. They're drawn to people like me, and now, it seems, people like you." Marcus's mind reeled, piecing together fragments of what he'd seen and heard. The hum, the strange resonance he felt in her presence, the intense pull he couldn't explain, it all pointed to something far beyond his understanding. As he struggled to make sense of it, Thalia reached out, placing a gentle hand on his arm. The touch was warm, grounding him. "You don't have to understand it all, Marcus. Just trust your instincts. We're not alone in this." Before he could respond, the room went dark, the station's power systems flickering out. Red emergency lights bathed the room in a dim glow, and the hum intensified, filling the air with a low, throbbing pulse that seemed to penetrate every corner of his mind. "They're here," Thalia whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum. "We need to leave. Now." Without another word, she led him out of his quarters, moving swiftly through the shadowed corridors of the station. The once crowded halls were eerily empty, as if the station's inhabitants had vanished into thin air. The hum grew louder with each step, and Marcus could feel it inside his chest, resonating with his heartbeat. As they rounded a corner, a figure emerged from the shadows. Marcus instinctively reached for his weapon, but Thalia grabbed his arm, stopping him. "Don't," she hissed. "It's one of them." The figure was tall and ethereal, its form barely solid, as if it were made of mist and starlight. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, deep pools of indigo that seemed to stretch into infinity. The void speaker didn't move toward them or show any signs of aggression. It simply watched, its gaze piercing through them. Marcus felt a strange sensation wash over him, a blend of curiosity and vulnerability, as if his thoughts were laid bare for the creature to see. He could feel it sifting through his mind, probing his memories, his fears, his dreams. His body tensed, every instinct screaming to run, to fight, but he held still, knowing that any movement might provoke the creature. After what felt like an eternity, the void speaker tilted its head, a silent gesture that Marcus somehow understood as recognition. It was acknowledging him, not as a threat, but as something intriguing. The creature's gaze shifted to Thalia, and Marcus felt a surge of protective instinct. But Thalia stood her ground, her eyes locked on the void speaker with a quiet strength. The hum around them softened, and for a moment, Marcus thought he heard a faint whisper, a voice gentle and distant, like an echo from another world. "Why are you here?" the voice asked, the words stretching and bending in his mind. Thalia took a deep breath, her voice steady. "We are here to seek understanding, nothing more." The void speaker seemed to consider her words, its form shifting slightly, as if it were made of liquid stardust. Marcus could feel its presence in his mind, a weightless but persistent presence that searched, evaluated, probed. Finally, The creature's voice echoed again, this time with a faint edge of curiosity. You are different, bound by fate, woven with threads, unseen. Marcus felt a chill as the words echoed in his mind. He didn't fully understand what they meant, but he knew they were significant. The creature seemed to sense something in both him and Talia, something that connected them on a level he couldn't comprehend. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the void speaker began to dissolve, its form fading into the shadows. The hum in the air grew softer, eventually fading into silence. The emergency lights flickered back to normal, and the power systems slowly resumed. For a long moment, Marcus and Talia stood in silence, each processing what had just happened. Finally, she turned to him, her expression a mix of relief and sorrow. They won't harm us, not yet, but they've seen something in us, Marcus, something that binds us. He shook his head, still reeling from the encounter. What does that mean? She looked away, her voice heavy with an unspoken truth. It means we're not just passengers on this station, Marcus. We're part of something much larger, something that the void speakers themselves may not fully understand. And now we're caught in their web. As they made their way back to his quarters, Marcus felt the weight of her words settle over him. He didn't know what lay ahead or how to prepare for it. All he knew was that whatever was coming, he and Talia would face it together, and that their connection, whatever it was, held the key to their survival on Station Zeta. The awakening signal. The following day, Marcus struggled to focus on his assignments, but the encounter with the void speaker haunted him. He replayed every detail in his mind, from the way it had peered into his thoughts to the cryptic words it had spoken about being bound by fate. He knew Thalia's people believed in cosmic connections, unseen forces that linked individuals across time and space. But for Marcus, it was difficult to reconcile this with his training, grounded as he was in discipline and logic. Yet, despite his doubts, he couldn't deny what he felt. It was as if his own existence had been tugged towards something, or someone, beyond his comprehension. Every interaction with Thalia seemed to deepen that feeling, and now, with the void speaker's presence lingering in his mind, he was left questioning everything he thought he knew. By late evening, Marcus decided he needed answers. He made his way to the common area on Station Zeta, a wide hall filled with a mix of plant life from different planets, holographic displays, and clusters of seating. Alien inhabitants and human traders mingled in low conversations. But his attention was fixed on one figure, Thalia, sitting quietly near a window overlooking the stars. Her expression was contemplative, her gaze far off, as if lost in a memory or a vision of something unseen. He approached, and she looked up, her eyes softening as they met his. Marcus, she greeted, her tone warm yet serious, as if she'd sensed the weight of his thoughts. You've come with questions. He took a seat beside her, glancing at the stars beyond the window. I don't know what's happening to me, Thalia. Ever since I arrived, I've felt connected to this place in ways I can't explain. And then that void speaker, the way it looked at us. It feels like there's something I'm supposed to understand, but I can't make sense of it. She reached out, placing a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but grounding. The universe is vast, Marcus, and full of mysteries even we cannot fathom. My people believe in a kind of resonance, a thread that binds certain souls together. When I met you, I felt it immediately, as though I'd known you long before we crossed paths. And the void speakers, they sense these threads. They're drawn to those who are intertwined. Marcus frowned, wrestling with the idea. Intertwined, like fate. Thalia nodded, her expression earnest. In a way. My people call it the Ashara, the eternal path. It's a bond that transcends lifetimes, a link between those who are meant to face something together. And sometimes, those on this path become beacons, drawing the attention of entities like the void speakers. He exhaled, trying to process her words. So they're drawn to us because of this bond. Not just the bond, but what it signifies. She paused, choosing her words carefully. It means you and I are on the verge of something. A turning point, a choice that could alter everything. The void speakers sensed potential, the potential for change or disruption. Marcus's mind raced, every logical instinct clashing with the undeniable feeling that she was right. The void speaker's message echoed in his mind, a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. But what choice? What are we supposed to do? As if in response to his question, the station's lights flickered, and the low hum he'd come to know returned, this time sharper, more insistent. The murmur of conversations around them quieted as inhabitants looked up, sensing the shift. The plants lining the common area seemed to sway in an invisible current, their leaves shimmering as though touched by an unseen energy. Felia's eyes widened. "They're back," she whispered. "The void speakers are trying to communicate." Marcus felt a strange sensation, a pull, a compulsion to leave, to find the source of the hum. And without a word, he stood, Felia rising beside him. It was as if they were both being guided, an unspoken signal directing their steps. They moved through the winding corridors of Station Zeta, following the pulse of the hum. It was stronger than before, resonating through their bodies like a living heartbeat. They passed other inhabitants along the way, humans, aliens, all casting wary glances but keeping their distance. It was as though an invisible boundary separated them from everyone else, isolating them in this moment. At last, they reached an old observation deck on the station's lower level, a place rarely used and forgotten by most. It overlooked the dark expanse of space, and as they stepped inside, the hum reached its peak, filling the room with a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. In the center of the room, a translucent figure took shape, coalescing from shadows and starlight. It was the void speaker, but this time its form was clearer, more defined. Its eyes, still like deep pools of indigo, fixed upon them, and its voice echoed in their minds, each word carrying a weight that pressed against their thoughts. "The path awakens," it intoned, the words stretching through the air, lingering in the silence. Felia stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with awe. "Why have you come here? What do you want from us?" The void speaker's form shimmered, and Marcus felt a wave of thoughts, not his own, but impressions, memories, emotions. Images flashed before his mind, a barren world, lifeless yet full of history. Two figures standing together against an encroaching darkness, a light, brilliant and defiant, holding back the void. "You are the key," the void speaker's voice resonated, its form rippling like water. "Bound by fate, united by choice, you are to awaken, or to perish." Marcus's breath caught in his throat as he absorbed the words. He exchanged a glance with Felia, seeing his own fear and determination reflected in her eyes. "Awaken to what?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the empty room. The void speaker's gaze held his, an intensity in its eyes that seemed to pierce through his very soul. The heart of the void. It stirs, waits, seeks an answer. Will you face the dark, or will you turn away? The cryptic message hung heavy in the air, and Marcus felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. Whatever this heart of the void was, it sounded like a force beyond anything he had ever encountered. He felt Felia's hand slip into his, her grip firm, anchoring him. "We'll face it," she said, her voice unwavering. "Together." The void speaker inclined its head, its form beginning to dissolve, the edges blurring like smoke. But as it faded, Marcus felt its presence linger, a final message echoing in his mind. "Then, prepare. The path is set. The choice is yours to make." And then it was gone, leaving them alone in the dark, the hum fading to silence. For a moment, neither of them spoke, each lost in their own thoughts. Marcus struggled to process everything, to reconcile the idea that he was somehow part of an ancient, cosmic struggle he barely understood. He turned to Thalia, her face illuminated by the dim light from the stars beyond the observation deck. "What does this mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She took a deep breath, her expression solemn. "It means we're not just bystanders, Marcus. Whatever's happening out there in the void, it's reaching for us. And if we don't act, if we ignore this, we may do more than just ourselves. He looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of her words. There was no turning back now, no denying the strange connection that had drawn them together. Whatever this path was, they were on it together, bound by a force he couldn't fully explain. "We'll need to find out what this heart of the void is," he said, his voice firm. "If it's the source of all this, then it's our only chance to stop whatever's coming." Thalia nodded, her expression determined. "Agreed. There's someone on this station, an elder from my world. She's ancient, a keeper of our knowledge. If anyone can tell us what we're facing, it's her." They shared a brief, charged silence, both feeling the gravity of the mission ahead. Marcus reached out, clasping her hand. "Then let's find her, and together we'll face whatever's waiting in the dark." With a final glance at the stars, they left the observation deck, each step echoing in the silence, each heartbeat resonating with a purpose they were only beginning to understand. The Keeper's Secrets. Marcus and Thalia moved with purpose through Station Zeta's maze-like corridors, navigating past clusters of curious inhabitants who eyed them with muted suspicion. Word of the recent containment breach had spread quickly, but no one seemed to know the true nature of the threat lingering in the void around the station. For Marcus and Thalia, however, the sense of urgency was palpable. The cryptic message from the void speaker weighed heavily on them both. Their destination was a secluded lower sector of the station, an area reserved for certain residents who, like Thalia's elder, held knowledge and secrets most inhabitants could never fathom. The lower sector was bathed in dim, amber lighting, its atmosphere thick with an odd, almost ceremonial silence. As they approached an arched doorway marked with symbols unfamiliar to Marcus, Thalia turned to him. "This is where our keepers reside," she whispered. "They're the holders of ancient knowledge, passed down through generations. My people believe that keepers are not just wise, they're conduits, able to connect with energies beyond what we understand." Marcus gave a brief nod, bracing himself. The more time he spent with Thalia, the more he was forced to open his mind to possibilities he'd once dismissed as mysticism. But every encounter with the void speaker had chipped away at his skepticism, leaving him willing, if not exactly comfortable, to trust in what lay beyond his understanding. Thalia pressed her palm against the door, and with a soft chime, it slid open. They stepped inside, entering a room filled with shimmering artifacts, relics that seemed to hum with their own faint internal light. At the center of the room sat an ancient figure cloaked in rich, iridescent robes. Her lavender skin was even paler than Thalia's, and her eyes held a depth that seemed to stretch across millennia. This was the Keeper. The elder's gaze settled on them, her expression calm yet piercing. "Thalia," she greeted, her voice a gentle, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the air. "And a human, curious." Thalia bowed slightly. "Esteemed Keeper Nareth, we seek your wisdom. We've been visited by the void speakers, and they spoke of a choice, a heart of the void that must be faced." At the mention of the void speakers, Nareth's expression darkened, her gaze shifting to Marcus. "So, it has come to this," she murmured, almost to herself. She gestured for them to sit, and they complied, settling on cushions across from her. "What do you know of the void speakers, Marcus of Earth?" she asked, her voice carrying a weight that made him feel as though he was standing before a cosmic judge. Marcus hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Only what Thalia has told me, and what I've experienced. They seem drawn to us, to our connection. They spoke of being bound by fate, and of a choice we must make. They mentioned something about the heart of the void, but I don't understand what it means." Nareth's gaze became distant, and for a moment, the room fell silent, save for the soft hum of the station. Finally, she spoke, her voice heavy with ancient knowledge. "The void speakers are not of this realm, nor are they creatures of flesh and blood as you and I. They are remnants of an old order, beings who evolved beyond physical form and became pure consciousness, able to traverse the vast emptiness of the cosmos. They exist outside of time and space, drawn to places of potential and change." Marcus listened intently, every word pulling him deeper into this cosmic mystery. And what is the heart of the void? Noreth's eyes flickered with something akin to fear. The heart of the void is a legend among my people, a place, or perhaps a state of being, where the boundaries between all worlds thin. It is said to be the birthplace of the void speakers and the source of their power. For millennia, my people have guarded the knowledge of the heart of the void, for it is not merely a location, it is an event, a moment when the universe itself opens, allowing energies from all realms to bleed together. In this place, choices are amplified, and a single decision can change the course of entire galaxies. Marcus exchanged a tense glance with Thalia, who seemed as unsettled as he was. So the void speakers want us to go there, to make a choice that could alter everything. Noreth nodded solemnly. Yes, and they have chosen you, Marcus, because they see something in you that is not bound by the laws of this realm. The same goes for you, Thalia. Your connection, this Ashara, is a rare bond, one that exists outside the constraints of time. Such a bond can ripple through the void, awakening forces beyond comprehension. Thalia's face was pale, but she held steady, her voice firm. But why now? Why are the void speakers revealing themselves to us after so long? Noreth took a deep breath, as if summoning the strength to deliver her answer. Because the heart of the void is stirring, closer to awakening than it has been in centuries. The station, this entire region of space, is aligned with the cosmic energies that will bring it forth. You, Marcus, and Thalia are at the center of that alignment. When the heart opens, you must decide whether to embrace its power or turn away. A profound silence fell over them. Marcus could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on him, the enormity of what was being asked. To stand before an ancient force capable of reshaping existence, it was beyond anything he'd imagined. Is there a right choice? He asked quietly, unsure of what answer he hoped for. Noreth's gaze softened, and for the first time, she looked almost human in her empathy. That, Marcus, is not something I can answer. The heart of the void offers only possibilities. It will amplify your will, your intentions. If you seek power, it will grant it. If you seek understanding, it will reveal truths. But beware, its gifts come with a cost, and what is gained cannot be undone. The implications of her words sent a shiver through him. He looked at Thalia, searching her face for some sign of doubt, but she met his gaze with unwavering determination. We have to go, Marcus, she said softly. We can't ignore this. Whatever the outcome, we need to see it through. He nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over him. Then we'll face it together.